Alright, several weeks ago we started a series on the Yesodot Kabbalah, the fundamentals of the Kabbalah. We're holding towards the end. I believe this coming 2 weeks we'll be speaking about a fascinating topic that has somewhat to do with the Kabbalah, and that is the Aleph Bet, the mystery of the Aleph Bet, the uniqueness of the Aleph Bet. Tonight is going to be mostly an introduction. It's a very, very big topic, and it's going to take us at least 2 weeks to cover it. So what I'm going to do tonight is give you a little bit of an introduction about Lashon HaKodesh and the Aleph Bet, and what is written about it in the Kabbalah, and what the commentaries have to say about it. Rabbi Elyahu says, in explaining why the Torah was given to us without vowels, without commas, without punctuation, that is the way we read it, unless you have a Chumash, is because there's a lot to learn from the letters, from the letters alone, because the same letters, the same group of letters can have more than one significance. Not only the same group of letters, but different combinations, they also have different significances. By eliminating the punctuation, by eliminating the vowels, we're able to interpret the Torah in more than one way. Obviously, we're talking about interpretations that are all acceptable, that all have been given down to us by our tradition. And there's a lot of hidden meanings as well, embedded in the text in all sorts of ways that we can gain by not having those interruptions, the punctuation. The Ramban also says that when Moshe Rabbeinu received the Torah, he received it not only as plain text, but along with it, he also received all the Gematriot, the Rashi Tevot, the Sefer Tevot, all the various ways of combining the letters to form additional meanings, to gain additional insight into the text. Because when we read the Torah, we're reading it just on the surface. It's a story, but it's not just a story. It's not a history book. It's a lot more than that. In order to gain more insight, one has to have the tradition of what was meant by this, what was meant by that. We have the Midrash that sheds additional light, that supplements all the details that are missing in the many stories. But not just the stories. There's a lot more. As I mentioned in the past, there are various layers to the Torah, Pshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod, the simple meaning and the deeper meaning, and those meanings that are insinuated in the text as well. Rabbi Eliezer, who discusses the 32 klalim, major rules, by which the Torah midreshed by him, which the Torah can be explained, the various rules, the mitzvot. There's some basic rules that applying them, you could learn out many of the halachot, the mitzvot of the Torah. And he says that part of those 32 basic rules include Gematriot and Rashi Tevot and Sefer Tevot. For those of you who are not familiar with what those are, Gematriot is the equivalent number of a word, because in Hebrew every letter has an equivalent number or value. That's Gematria. For example, the word Ish, Aleph is 1, Yud is 10, Shin is 300. So the numerical value of the word Ish is 311. Then you have something called Rashi Tevot and Sefer Tevot. Rashi Tevot is you may have several words, one after another, but if you combine the first letter of each word, they form another word. There are 3 separate words, but if you combine the first letter or Sefer Tevot, the last letters of each one of these sequential words, you gain another word which may be embedded in that text, which sheds more light, which gives you additional insight as to what is going on. So all of that has been handed down, that is part of our tradition. It's not that just somebody came up with it and decided, oh, here's another idea. This is all part of our tradition. One of the main sources of the meaning of the Aleph Bet and what it teaches us is found in perhaps the oldest book of the Kabbalah, called Sefer Yetzirah. In Sefer Yetzirah, which our tradition says was dictated by Avraham Avinu, even though he did not write it, he did not author it exactly, but he was the one that said what the book contains. In that book, there's some elaboration, not too much, it's a very brief, very small book, but there's some elaboration as to the meaning of the Aleph Bet. What's the significance of the 22 letters? The Sefer Yetzirah says as follows: In 32 Netivot Chokhmah, Hakad Hashem et Haolam, in 32 paths of wisdom, Hashem engraved or formed this world. Of these 32 paths of wisdom, we covered the 10 Sefirot. 10 Sefirot are channels, different kinds of channels of energy, or whatever you want to call them, emanations of Hashem, through which the world was created, and through the entire existence continues to receive this divine light from Hashem. We call it divine light even though there's no physical light. So these are the channels, the tzinorot, through which the Shefa, through which all this light is coming down from above, through which the world was created. And in addition to these 10 sefirot, or emanations, you also have the 22 letters of the Aleph Bet. Total of 32, 22 letters plus 10 sefirot. Now these otiyot, these letters, the Sefer Yetzirah says, are building blocks. They're the actual building blocks of the world in different combinations. In other words, if you were to know how to combine the letters in different ways, you can create certain things. As it is brought down in the Kabbalah, that one can create a golem, which is a human being without a neshama, just by knowing the secrets of the Kabbalah concerning the formation of letters. Who knew this very, very well? The Tzalel. The Tzalel, the Torah says, was the one in charge. He was the one that was given the responsibility of building the Mishkan. And his great knowledge that he was endowed with, that Hashem gave him, included how to use these letters to put together some very, very difficult projects. So the letters can be called stones, and a complete word can be called a home, an entire bite. Together with a few, just like you use stones to put up, to build up a home, through the formation of this building, putting together a few letters, you create a house, an entire edifice. These individual letters are somewhat different than the Sefirot. The Sefirot are channels, but these letters are, or contain, I should say, a koach ruchani, a very special spiritual force or energy. And each letter is very different. And how this energy affects us, we'll talk about a little bit later. The appearance of the letter, the shape of the letter, the pronunciation of the letter, and the numerical value of the letter are all important. Because from each one of these facets, the numerical value, the shape of the letter, and the way we pronounce it, we are able to learn a lot. There's a lot of information that is gained from each one of these facets. In the Sefer Yetzirah, he goes on to explain that the letters are divided into three. You have what's called the otiyot ha'imahot, the mother letters, the base letters. There are three: Aleph, Mem, and Shin. Aleph stands for avir, for air. Mem stands for mayim, for water. And Shin stands for esh, fire. Amash, Aleph, Mem, Shin are the mother letters, meaning that the world is created from these three letters. They are the foundation. Air, fire, and water form the foundation of everything. Even though earth is one of the four elements, the foundation or the source of everything, according to the Kabbalah, is these three letters: air, fire, and water. These are the mother letters. Then you have what's called the 7 otiyot kulot, the double letters. The double letters are Bet, Gimel, Daled, Kaf, Pei, Resh, and Taf. Beged Kafrat. They are called double letters because they have two ways of pronouncing them, depending if there is a dot in them or not, like Bet and Vet, with the exception of Resh, which usually does not have a dot, nevertheless is pronounced somewhat different. Then you also have the letters Man Tafach, Mem, Nun, Tzadi, Pei, and Kaf, which have a different surah, a different form or shape when they appear at the end of a word. Then you have the 12 simple letters, the remaining letters. These particular letters are tied to, as I said, to various facets in the creation. These facets are time, space, and the human spirit. When I say they're tied to these three, it's because they affect all three. They therefore have different interpretations in these three particular areas. How they affect us, how they affect our physical surroundings, how they affect time. When I say time, I mean the days of the week that we also see, the seasons. There is a correlation between a particular letter to a particular place, a particular time, and to the spirit, to the human being himself. So let's maybe talk about time first. As far as time, the mother letters, the Aleph, Mem, Shin, they correspond to the seasons of the year. We have 4 seasons. The Shin, which is the fire, corresponds to the hot season, to the summer, which are the months of Tammuz, Av, and Elul. Then you have the winter, which corresponds to the letter Mem, which is water. That's when you have the rain. And then you have Aleph, the air, that corresponds to the other 2 in-between seasons. After all, the 2 extremes are the summer and the winter. And what do you have in between? You have the autumn and you have fall. The autumn, not spring. Autumn and spring. These in-between seasons correspond to the letter Aleph, which is air. You have the letters Beget, Kaparat. These are letters, 7 letters, which have a different pronunciation whether you have a vowel in them or not. They correspond to the days of the week. Bet corresponds to Sunday, Gimel corresponds to Monday, Dalet corresponds to Tuesday, Kaf corresponds to Wednesday, Pei to Thursday, Resh to Friday, and Tav to Shabbat. And as far as the simple letters, they correspond to the months of the year. You have Hey Nisan, Vav Yan, Zain Sivan, Het Tammuz, Tet Av, Yud for the month of Elul, Zain for Tishrei, Nun for Cheshvan, Samach for Kislev, Ain for Tevet, Tzadik for Shvat, and Kuf for Adar. What do we see from all of this? That every single day of the year has 3 corresponding letters. The letter corresponding to the month, to the season, and to the day of the week. Certain energies that have some relationship or that affect these particular times. Anybody know why this language is called Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language? Well, obviously this language is unique. It's not like any other language. It's a holy language because it's the language that Kadosh Baruch Hu used to create the world and by which the Torah was first given. It was not given in Swahili. It was not given in Cantonese or in Tagalog. It was given in Lashon HaKodesh. How do we know? Does anybody have any proof? How do we know the Torah was given in Lashon HaKodesh? The Rabbi says, yes, of course there's proof. Because in creating the woman, the Torah says, Upon the Zot Yikareh Isha, with this we will call Isha, Kimeish V'tata, because she was taken from Ish. In no other language in the world could you say that. The Torah is telling us this will be called Isha because she is taken from Ish. That's proof. Had it been given in another language, we would not be able to make that statement. Because Isha, the word Isha, comes from the word Ish. For those of you who remember the story of Migdal Babel, rabbis tell us, Hashem balal sham et kol hasafot. Hashem mixed up all the tongues over there. That is where the different languages of the world began to take form and shape. And little by little, they formed additional dialects, and languages became even more and more different over time. So many of the languages that were spoken back then are no longer spoken today. They forgot, or they've been changed. Even if you try to read the English of Shakespeare today, you won't understand too much of it. Because languages, except for Lashon HaKodesh, have evolved. They continuously evolve. Lashon HaKodesh, however, is different. It's the mother of all languages, the first language, and it hasn't really changed. Now some of you might be surprised. What do you mean, Rabbi, that it hasn't changed? In Israel, the language that's spoken today is very different. Well, that's not Lashon HaKodesh. That's called Ivrit. That's called Hebrew. Now, isn't Hebrew Lashon HaKodesh? No. It's similar. It has many of the same roots. It comes from Lashon HaKodesh. But Hebrew, that's spoken today, has evolved in many ways like other languages. It has incorporated foreign words into its vocabulary. The same was true even during the time of the Bet HaMikdash, where the rabbis used Greek words. It's okay, nothing wrong with it, but it's not Lashon HaKodesh. It's a different language that evolved over time. Yeah. Right, that's a very good point. Lashon HaKodesh is a holy tongue because of the many words used to describe the private parts of the body, perhaps, and other things and other ideas, is done in a very pure way. That's very true too. That's a good point. Another reason why it's called Lashon HaKodesh. However, what I want to emphasize right now is that there's a big difference between Lashon HaKodesh and other languages. Perhaps another time I'll give a special lecture on how do we know and how can we prove that all languages come from Lashon HaKodesh. That's a very fascinating area where you can actually prove whether it's Chinese, whether it's Indonesian, whether it's Persian, and definitely Arabic because it's so close to Hebrew. You can actually show how these languages come or originate from Lashon HaKodesh. But for now, I just want to describe the main differences. The obvious difference is as follows. All the languages of the world, without any exception, except for Lashon HaKodesh, are mustamot. In other words, the vocabulary that is used for the most part, is something that people have agreed upon. There are some words, of course, in some languages that come from other languages. English is a good example of a language that has included words and many synonyms of many languages, and they mean exactly the same thing. Take, for example, the word big and large. Exactly the same thing. This large comes from French. It means wide. But there is another word in English for wide. So even though it may be used differently, they really mean the same thing. English has therefore become a very, very large language with many, many words because it has adopted words from many languages. But these languages, nevertheless, the words that have been adopted or are mostly used are muskamot, what people agree to call something. Not only is it something that people agree to call, many words in many languages are words after someone. Take, for example, the word to pasteurize. What do you think that comes from? Mr. Pasteur, who came up with this important idea. Right? So, there's a lot of words like that. So these are words that people have agreed upon. Lashon HaKodesh is a holy language. It's a language that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us. And it has nothing to do with what people agreed upon because it comes from Hashem. And it's unique because every word, every letter, is representative of something. The essence of the word that describes something, the essence of that word is described in the letters, and not only in the letters, which letters make up the word, but in the shape of the letters. You can gain so much by looking at a word in Lashon HaKodesh and figure out what it means just by looking at the letters, looking at their shape, and see what those letters are. Not only that, if you become an expert in Lashon HaKodesh, the rules, the grammar, and I were to ask you how would you say a particular word, and you don't know too much Hebrew, or Lashon HaKodesh I should say, but you know all the rules, you may be able to figure out what word to use to describe a particular animal or a particular event, just by following these rules. In order to understand this point a little bit better, and how Lashon HaKodesh is different than other languages, and how in Lashon HaKodesh the word says a lot about what it is describing, let's take an example. Does the word dog mean anything to you? You might as well call it something else. What is the meaning of the word dog? All the word dog tells us is it's describing this animal that we know, as a dog. But how do you say a dog in Hebrew? Kelev. And what does Kelev mean? Kulo lev, the Rabbi tells us. He's all heart. That is what he's man's best friend. Now I just gave you the simple meaning of the word Kelev. Next week, with Hashem, we're going to go into the deeper meaning of why Kelev is made up of the letters Kaf, Lan, and Bet. That is what's incredible. That is what's so unique about the word. So just to give you a quick description of what this word is, that it shows the essence of the animal. You can see this in the word Kelev. It has to do with his whole heart. Kulo lev. That is as far as the vocabulary of the language goes. What about the letters? Well, I think all of you know that letters in almost every ABC in the world is something that people decided upon. There's some even very recent alphabets that a particular king decided to come up with. The Korean alphabet is not so old. Alphabets have changed. The Turkish alphabet used to be the Arabic alphabet. Now they become more Latin. Right? And all these alphabets are originally what people got together and decided what's going to be an A, what's going to be a B, what's going to be a C. It doesn't come from anything. Before these Roman type of alphabets. They had hieroglyphics in Egypt, which they still have a little bit in China. The Chinese alphabet is comprised of symbols, and you have what's called cuneiform, what the Assyrians used. You have various kinds of alphabets. What are all these alphabets about? What do they have in common? They're symbols. That's all they are. But there's no meaning to a particular shape of the A or the B. It has no significance. Whereas in Lashon HaKodesh, the tzura of the ot, the shape of the letter, has great significance as well. If you read a little bit about the history of Lashon HaKodesh, you will find that because it's a holy language, it wasn't used so much. People in different communities use Yiddish, Ladino, and even in Eretz Israel, during certain periods of our history, they used Aramaic. Even though there was more than one reason for the use of Aramaic. One was because of convenience. It was the lingua franca. It was like the English of today for the whole Middle East. But many times the rabbis intentionally did not use Lashon HaKodesh if the subject matter, the topic that was being discussed, was something holy, not holy. They did not want to use the Lashon HaKodesh to talk about horses and something that was not holy. And the same is true with the Hebrew or with the Lashon HaKodesh script, with the Aleph Bet. It was not used all the time. Only when Ezra Sofer came back from Babel was the Sefer Torah written the way it is written today in the Kitab Ashuri. Because for a long time, the Sefer Torah was written in the Kitab Ivri, a different script. It looks or it resembles more the Greek. If you want to see it, you can still see one. The Samaritans, the Shomronim have it in Eretz Israel. We even have old Sefer Torah with that original script. But it's not the script, according to most opinions, in which the Luchot, in which the tablets were given, and it's not the original script in which, of course, the Torah was intended to be written in, because Lashon HaKodesh really is written in Kitab Ashuri. Why is it called Kitab Ashuri, which is the writing that we have and we use today in the Sefer Torah? It's not just the regular block letters that we use in the Siddur. If you notice, compare the Siddur, the Chumash, the Sefer Torah, you will see they resemble, but there's a lot of small nuances, small but important details in the Sefer Torah, in the shape of the otiyot, of the letters of the Sefer Torah. That's called Kitab Ashuri. And if you have a computer and you're downloading Hebrew fonts, you will notice some of the programs have the font called Ashuri or called Stam, because that's what's used in Sefer Torah and Rizot. Kitab Ashuri. This is very, very important because this is the real Kitab that we're talking about. This is the one that has many details in the shapes of the letters, and it's so important and it's so holy and it makes such a big difference that if a letter in the Sefer Torah does not have its original shape, it does not look what it should look like, it can invalidate, it can make the Sefer Torah pasul. That is how important it is. We're not even talking right now about missing letters or extra letters. But if a letter just loses its shape, it's not the way it should be, you can make the Sefer Torah pasul. Why is it called Kitab Ashuri? I thought there's different opinions. It's not exactly like some say that it came from Ashur, from the Assyrians. But some opinions do say that we brought it with us from Ashur. When we returned from Galut Babel, we brought it with us from Ashur. That could be one explanation. Others say Ashur is beautiful, or the proper, correct form of writing the letters of the Torah. How about the names of the letters? Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, which some languages have copied from us. Where did they come from? In the same way that the meanings of the letters, the interpretation, their shapes, came to us, was handed down to us by tradition, the same is true about the names of the letters, because even the names of the letters have a lot to say, as we will see some more next week. The names of the letters have a lot to say. Let's take a quick example. Bet. Bet. What's bet? A bite. A house. And it looks like a house. So there's a reason of why letters are called the way they are. And the names of these letters have also been handed down for us through tradition. Okay, so what we'll do next for the next few minutes is I'm going to give you an introduction of certain rules that we need to have in mind that will help us understand the lecture of next week. No, next week at the end, towards the end, it may be about colors, but this will continue with Hashem next week. It's a very big lecture. So, yeah, next week I will hopefully be able to show you on the screen what the letters look like and the significance of the shape and the meaning. But first we need to know a few rules. Rule number one: when one studies the letters, and one may find that there's more than one interpretation, one needs to keep in mind that it is very possible, as one opinion says, that each letter has a positive energy and a possible negative energy. Because Hashem, after all, in the world created 10 dargot of Kedusha, 10 dargot of Tum'ah, 10 levels of purity and 10 levels of impurity. In other words, there is a certain equality there. So the same letter, depending on how it's used or where it is, the position of a word, can have a different kind of energy. What I have found, I haven't seen anybody say it, perhaps they do say similarly, but I've done my own research on this, and I have found that many letters are similar in their meaning. How could that be? Well, take for example the letters Bet, Kaf, and Resh. Bet, the numerical value of Bet is 2. The numerical value of Kaf is 20. The numerical value of Resh is 200. What do these three have in common? 2. In other words, if you break it down to what's called in Gematria, the Gematria Ktana, they're all 2. 1 is 2, 200 is 2. So they do have certain similarities. And I will show you that next week when we go through each one of the letters and what they represent. Same thing with Gimel, Lamed, and Shin, or Dalet, Mem, and Taf. Right? Gimel is 3, Lamed is 30, Shin is 300. Dalet is 4, Mem is 40, Taf is 400. I have found that there are certain similarities. Even though every letter is unique, it has its own energy, there appears to be some common ground between these letters. Another idea that I have found, another concept behind the letters, is that even though we'll be discussing the more simplistic idea behind every letter, there's definitely a deeper and more inner meaning for every letter, which is Kabbalah, which also briefly discusses the names and the shapes of the letters, has a more simplistic meaning of what the letters, why the letters look the way they are. Good morning, Shabbat. Yeah, it speaks about the letters. Yeah. When we talk about Gimel and Daled, I'll show it to you. Next week we'll cover that. So there is a simple way of looking at the letters, but there's always the more mystical, the deeper meaning behind it, especially when we're dealing with the shapes of the letters, why they look the way they do. So if you ever read a book, the reason I'm giving you this rule is because in case you ever read something about a letter, you say, oh, well, I remember something different. Just remember, it is possible there can be an additional meaning, a more mystical meaning behind the shape or the meaning of the letter. Another very important rule, as we will see with the many words, we're not only going to see how significant the letters are. One of the most fascinating areas of this subject is how these various letters, once we understand the meaning, how words are composed from them. And when you see a word, and you know the meaning of every single letter, you say, oh, I know the essence of this whole word just by looking at the letters. And now when we're talking about words, Lashon HaKodesh is unique because Lashon HaKodesh uses roots, Shorashim. Arabic also has a similar system. There's very few languages in the world that have roots. And what is a root? The root is the main word, but many words, many other additional words are formed by just changing the letters somewhat or by adding another letter or two. They all come from the same root. Anybody can think of an example of a word, a root word, and it has additional meanings if you add a letter to it? What? No, in Hebrew, Lashon HaKodesh. Alright, Melech is a king, Malach to rule. That's okay. That's a simple one. What? So that's with a ches. Yeah. The what? Which one? Yeah. Yes. Esh and Ish, perhaps. Yeah. They share two letters in common. So obviously they have something there. but they're not necessarily from the same. Yes. Ozen, very good, and I'm going to speak about that soon. Ozen and Moznaim. Ozen is the ears. Moznaim is a scale. And I'll tell you why soon. What they have to do with each other, but from the same root. What we're not concerned with, which takes us to the next rule, what we're not concerned with when we're talking about roots is additional letters. The otiot bat lam, bet, kaf, lam, and ven are always inserted at the beginning of the word to show position. Ba, bait, la, bait, ke, bait, mi, bait. We're not interested with those, I guess in English you would call prepositions, because they're not part of the word. What are we concerned with? Or is it propositions? It is preposition, right? Okay. Just making sure. Yeah, I appreciate it. Says it, suffixes, right? So what are we concerned with when we're dealing with words and the composition of words? The roots. Most root words in Lashon HaKodesh comprise of 3 letters. There are some exceptions, but most of them are 3 letters. And these 3 letters, again, are somewhat modified because there are other words that are similar ideas that have a similar root. But some of the letters are modified, and therefore they represent a different word altogether. Another important rule in this subject of the Aleph Bet is that even though we know that every letter is important, and through understanding the meaning of the letters we will understand the essence of the word, it's also important to note the mikum, the position of a letter. I'll give you a quick example. The word nega, nun gimel ain. You know what that means? It's a plague, like the nega tzaraat. You can have the exact same 3 letters with a completely different meaning. Oneg, ain, nun, gimel. It's the exact same 3 letters, almost reversed. Right? How could that be? They're not necessarily, they're of course not from the same root, they just happen to share the same letters. So what's important here is also to note the position of the letter. If the nun is at the beginning, is it in the middle of the letter, of the word, of the root word, or is it at the end? Each one has a different idea behind it, as I'll explain in a moment. Let's talk about the 3-letter words for a moment. 3 letters. So we have 3 positions. Position number 1, I've heard some authors on this topic call the key to the word, the key to understanding the word. What does that mean, the key? If you look around in the Torah for similar words that begin with the same letter, you may see already similarities. That's the key, just the key to open the door to trying to understand what is activating, what's the energy behind this word, what is the essence of it, what pe'ulah, what action is happening here will be described to the first letter. That's the key to understanding. You will not have a complete understanding because there's so many other compositions, but it's the first letter, and it's the important letter. The first 2 letters, or the last 2, once you grab 2 letters, now you have what some would call the gar'in, that's the seed. When you have 2 letters similar in many, many words, you're actually talking about very, very similar things now. Now, the 3rd letter will make small modifications to the root word. Perhaps I should give you a quick example in case some of you do not come back. Let's take the word lerases, or another word maybe, lefotzets, to explode. You see, these letters, these examples that I just gave you, the last 2 are the same. Tzadik, tzadik, right? Or samach, samach, or lelagleg, lagleg. The first 2 and the last 2 are the same. Whenever you have 2 of the same, what does it tell you? That there's more emphasis. Just like the dagesh, the little dot that you see in the bet, in the kaf, in the aleph, most letters, not all letters have dagesh in Lashon HaKodesh. Whenever you have a dagesh, that's emphasis. Whenever you have 2 letters, it's like a double emphasis. Whereas the first 2 letters of the fotzes means just to open up. Where once you add the last letter and you make it 2 tzadik, you're opening up a lot, which is what a bomb is all about, from an explosion. You're having a lot more of the same thing. So anytime you have double letters, at the end, what you're having a slight modification of the original root, which has to do with opening up. Pei to do with the mouth, the peh. It's a pticha, it's an opening. And you have words that, additional letters that you add to this word, which would signify that it's something is breaking up, it's opening up, it's falling apart. All this is similar, falling apart, breaking up, opening up. And if you add an additional letter for greater emphasis, it means it's falling apart in many, many pieces. And I'll give you examples of Hashem next week of how these additional letters, or the last letter, just adds a little bit more emphasis or modifies the main root, which is either the first or the two letters that we are concerned with. We're concerned with all three, because all three together form a root which gives us a clear idea as to what we're talking about, what the essence of this word is. If you want to understand the essence of this idea, of this bird, of this animal, you need to have all three letters. Alright, since we don't have that much time today, let's just take Aleph as an example today. Today we'll just do Aleph. What does the word Aleph mean? Aleph is number one. It's in the beginning. But what does the word Aleph mean? Aleph means Alufo Shel Olam, the head, the superior being in the world. That's Hashem. Aluf is the head, the superior, referring to Hashem. Number one. The Aleph is also to teach, because all the Chokhmah comes from Hashem. So this is as far as the meaning of the word, what the word Aleph means. How about the shape of the Aleph? The computer is not working now, but I'll show it to you next week. The shape of the Aleph in the Kitab HaAshuri is comprised of two Yuds and a Vav. A Yud on top, a Yud at the bottom, and a slanted Vav connecting the two Yudim. What's the numerical value of Yud? 10. We have two tens, that's 20, plus a Vav, that's 6. Hashem's name. So Aleph represents Hashem. In the shape of the letter, you have two Yudim, which have other ideas behind why Yud. But here I showed you how the numerical value of the shape of the letter also is representative of Hashem. If you look at the Zohar, you won't find, I think, this idea of Yud and Vav. You will find something else. You will find that the two Yudim represent the two arms, and the Vav represents the body, a human being. And I'll explain that momentarily. Let's take now an example. So I just gave you an example of the meaning of a letter, the shape of a letter. Now let's see the significance of the letters themselves in a word. Let's take the word Adam, a human being. 3 letters, Aleph, Dalet, Mem. Aleph is important here. It's number 1. Who does it represent? Hashem. What does Hashem have to do with Adam? Well, the rabbi tells us, Shloshah Shutafim Ba'Adam. A human being has 3 partners. Hashem is represented in the Aleph. Dam, which is the Hayyut, which is the living spirit of the human being, is provided by who? By the parents. The human being has 3 partners, Hashem, the father, and the mother, and each one contributes something else. Aleph is Hashem, Dam is the parents. How do we know Dam is the parents? Well, let's go back to the numerical values again. What's the gematria of Av, the father? 3, Aleph and Bet. 1 and 2 is 3. What's the gematria of Em, mother? 41, Aleph and Mem. What's 41 and 3? 44. What's Dam? Dalet and Mem? 44. You see? So what you have here is the word Adam. You have the whole idea that the rabbis teach us, that man has 3 partners. Aleph, Kadosh Baruch Hu, and Dam, his parents. In the word Ish, you have the Aleph. We talked about the importance of the position of the Aleph. Aleph in the word Ish is at the very beginning, meaning that the Aleph rules over the Yesh, over his physical being. In other words, the spirit needs to rule over the physical being. That is his purpose. I saw someone who mentioned that. Or the word Az. Az Yashir Moshe V'nei Yisrael Tashira Azot. What is the word Az? Then. Aleph and Zayin. Zayin has to do with the nature. Aleph means to overcome the nature. When are we talking about overcoming the nature? Olam Haba, in the future. So as in the word Az Yashir Moshe, the Rabbi tells us, as we're talking about Olam Haba. There's some remez as to when we're talking about. The letter Zayin also has to do with Olam Haba, because this Olam, this world, is up to 6. 6 corners, 6,000 years, Zayin representing the world to come. So Aleph, in other words, will rule. When will it be? In Olam Haba, in the future. And Ozen was mentioned before. Why is Ozen called Ozen? What did we say before? In every word we can see the essence of it. Why it's called that way? Well, they only discovered recently, I think about 200 years ago, that the ear does not only hear, it has a very important additional function, that is to create balance. What do they give you when you go on a cruise? To maintain your balance, there's some patches that they put you behind the ear. There is an importance to the ear when it comes to the function of balance, of not feeling that you're fainting. It could be a problem in the ear. The person is not able to keep his balance, because there's something in the ear that is able to preserve the balance. And if you want to know more about it, I'm sure they already have a whole write-up about that in the encyclopedia. But that's what the word Ozen means. It creates or gives the balance, and that's why Moznaim is called Moznaim, because it's a balance. In other words, they both share the same idea. Moznaim being a scale, a balance, Ozen being the ear providing the balance. I gave you just a few ideas of what the meaning behind Aleph is, the name, the shape, and how it can help us understand the essence of the word. But just to finish up, the Pashtut, if we look at the Aleph simplistically, just simplistically, how does Aleph differ from the rest of the letters of the alphabet? In the following way. Aleph being number one represents the shoresh, the root, the essence of everything that it is describing. It could be the spiritual part of that item, it could be the essence, it could be the root. All of that is to be found in Aleph. And that is why the word Av and Em begin with an Aleph, because they are the beginning. They are the ones that give birth. Even though those words do not represent the action of giving birth, we'll talk about that next week when we speak about the letters that have to do with giving birth, the action of giving birth. But what does everything come from? It comes from a father and mother. The father and mother therefore both have Aleph, for the reason being that they are the beginning. They are the ones that provide the life. Same thing with the word Adon. Adon being a master, being the one on top, being the one in charge. It begins with an Aleph. There's something there that is significant, that is in place number one. And the word or Esh, these two words also begin with the letter Aleph, because they are Yesodot. Esh is a Yesod. It is one of the elements on which the world is created from. And Or is from where everything originates from. In other words, there's a significance to the Aleph in all these words, and in additional words that you will find if you check around. It has a significance of being one, being important, being the source of whatever it is that we're talking about. So B'ezrat Hashem will continue with the rest of the Aleph Bet next week.